Hey guys, Andy here, and today we have I'm going to be ranking all of my rainbow palettes because it's Pride Month, and I figured what better month to do this in, and I didn't realize I had so many rainbow palettes in my collection. So if you want to see what rainbow palettes I have, what order I'm going to rank them in, then just stay tuned. As always, all of the makeup that I'm wearing will be listed in the description box down below. And let's just go ahead and get on into the ranking. Alright, so I have 12 palettes here, which again, I did not think that I had, oh, it's heavy. I did not think I had this many rainbow palettes. When I was going through my collection, I could think of a few off the top of my head, but I didn't realize I had 12. 2 of them are pastel, but they're still a rainbow, because to me, a rainbow palette needs to have, the rainbow colors, Roy G. Biv. Or at least most of them. Because not all of them, red isn't a common color in a lot of the palettes, but as long as they have almost all of the other colors, because a lot of them have pink instead of red, but if they have every other color of the rainbow and just not red, it's still a rainbow palette in my opinion. But yeah, so we're just going to go ahead and get started. Number 12, which, unpopular opinion, Natasha Denona Pastel Palette. For me, this is a rainbow palette. I don't know if y'all will all agree with me, but you see, we got yellow. This is like a greeny yellow. We have blues, pinks, purples, orange. This can be considered like a red. So for me, pastels are still rainbows. It's just a different hue, and this is a rainbow palette. And for me, I do not like this palette. The cream to powder shades, which are this shade Bora and this shade Bubble. I believe this shade Tool is one. I think that's the only ones. It might also be this shade Zest, but I know for a fact it's these two, this shade and this shade here. I do not like that formula to begin with from Natasha Denona. I don't like those. But in this palette particularly, it's like upon my very first use on getting this palette, they were hard panned. Like I used them and they were hard panned immediately. The mattes in this palette, like you can do pastels and they should still have pigment. These mattes do not have pigment. You have to, even on top of a white base, build these up a million times over to barely see them. The shimmers in this palette are beautiful, and it's one of the reasons I keep this palette, because one, I like the packaging, and two, I think the shimmers are really nice and they perform fine. But the mattes in this palette, in my opinion, are garbage, and it's number 12. Number 11 is out of order, sorry. This is Morphe x Avani Greg. This is the For the Bebs palette. And the only reason, this is what it looks like. Obviously, you can clearly see this is a rainbow. And then these shades down here are all water-activated liners. The reason this one's ranking number 11 is simply because I've never used it. It's in my shame pile. I've only swatched it. So that's why this is ranking so low. And also just because I notoriously don't really love Morphe's formula. So because I haven't used it, it has to rank lower than all the other palettes here. But I do love the color story. It swatched pretty well. I love that we have water-activated liners. So, maybe next year, maybe this will rank differently, and maybe I'll have more rainbow palettes. But for now, that is where that one needs to rank. In spot number 10, we have my Cara Beauty Yummy in My Tummy palette. Again, we have this little bit of rainbow with some neutrals. A lot of these are rainbow plus some neutrals, but this one for me, the mattes are extremely powdery, and they're not very pigmented. You have to build them up a lot. The shimmers are nice. There's only 4 shimmers, and they're nice, but this is my least favorite Cara Beauty palette out of all of the ones that I have, and yeah, I love the punny names of the palette, but the mattes just aren't the best. And they have way better formulas than this, so that's why that one's gonna place there. In number 9 spot, we have ColourPop Fade into Hue, which this might be an unpopular opinion for some. This is quintessential rainbow palette. For me, I think I just got a dud palette because this half of the palette performs phenomenally. I love these 3 rows. They're great. This half of the palette just doesn't perform the same at all. And specifically, the blue column here is just a dud. The mattes are super patchy and powdery. This Hot Copic shade, or Copic, Hot Copic, is hard panned. I can't even get a swatch of it. I mean, the glitter is fine. That's a pet peeve that each column doesn't have a pressed glitter because I love ColourPop's pressed glitters, but that's neither here nor there. But yeah, this blue column specifically is hot garbage, but this half of the palette in general just doesn't perform the same as this half. So for me, it's gotta rank where it ranks. I'm so sorry. I've heard very mixed reviews on this palette for that reason, because some people get a dud and then some people get an amazing palette. So you never know what you're gonna get, and that's unfortunate. In the number 8 spot, we have Makeup Revolution X Alexis Stone. This is the Instinct palette. This is what she looks like. This is an all matte palette, which I don't mind. As you can see, clearly rainbow gradient. This gray column is hot garbage. It looks like there's a gradient, but on the eyes, they're all the same shade. Even this dark gray comes off the same as the rest on the eyes. And I know that it's not super pertinent when it comes to a rainbow color scheme having the grays be garbage, but I just think that we could have done a slightly different gradient. This palette, because the mirror doesn't fold back, is hard to hold. The red gradient, the reds are also very similar, besides like this one, but these 3 reds are very similar on the eyes. The other columns all have a really nice gradient and do look different, but yeah, those 2 columns are annoying. For spot number 7, we have the NYX Ultimate Edit Brights palette. This is probably the first rainbow palette I ever bought. And it's just another all matte palette. It's a nice quality, it's just kind of, unless you're going to make a all matte rainbow look, it's hard to make a look out of this palette. I usually reach into this when I want one of these specific shades. And these are all mid-tone rainbow shades. So I only pull this out now when I want one of these specifically. But like, if this is what you're looking for and you need this, it's something really nice to have in my collection. So this is pretty middle of the road for me, but I'm happy that I have it. In spot number 6, we have my Profusion Neons palette, which besides the shimmer, the rest is mattes. For me, this top row has hardly any variation. Like, the pink is a slightly different, but the orange and the reds are all very, very similar. And, like, you're gonna have one shimmer in the palette. This shimmer should be crazy impactful. Or, in my opinion, they should have put a pressed glitter in it. Like, if you're gonna have one shimmer. Because Profusion has my favorite pressed glitter formula. But this shimmer isn't that great. Like, it's not that impactful on the eyes. And if you're gonna have one shimmer in the whole palette, it should be impactful, in my opinion. So that's my whole spiel on this palette. The bottom row, phenomenal. The color story is great. The gradient's great. But the difference between these reds, there is hardly any difference. And then between the orange is hardly any difference. So there could have just been more variety on this one. In spot number 5. So now we're getting more into the top 5. So we're getting into palettes. And, like, I love all of these palettes except that Natasha Denona one. That one makes me angry. So in spot number 5, we have the Pat McGrath Celestial Nirvana palette. This was 2022's holiday palette. So this is what she looks like. This is like my most loosely take on a rainbow, but like red, purple, blue, indigo, green. Like, in my opinion, this is still a rainbow palette. If you want to argue with me, that's fine. But this is lower on the ranking because the mattes are they're kind of patchy. Because they're pigments. So, like, you really have to press them and where you want them and then blend them. But once you figure out how to work with this palette, it's fine. The shimmers are beautiful. It's the only Pat McGrath palette I have, and it's sentimental, but I did have to place it where it is because of the matte quality. In spot number 4, we have my Lanci Aurora Glow palette. This is on Amazon. I got this off Amazon, so I'll have that linked in the description box. But this is a blacklight and UV reactive palette. So all of the mattes are UV reactive, like they glow in a black light. The glitters here that have the bigger stars glow in the dark. Yeah. And it works. I have tried it. As you can see, I've hit pan in some of the pressed glitters. I will say that the glitters are not the best quality. And you absolutely need a glitter glue. And I don't recommend I don't think these are recommended for use around the eye area. So, do what you will, use your own caution, but I have loved it. It is so much fun when you're going out to, like, the bar, a party, or whatever. It's a lot of fun. So, that will be linked. It's a super fun time. Next, in spot number 3, we have Makeup a Murder Burner Phone. This is the other pastel rainbow palette here. This one's in spot number 3 because this is what the Natasha Denona palette should be. Because this is neons done right. This is so pigmented. I love the shimmers that are in it. I love the color story. I wish we didn't have these neutrals. Personally, I think we could have done with if we're still going for neons, we could have done a red instead, in my opinion, instead of neutrals. But, gotta appeal a little bit to everybody. But I love this palette. And this is what, in my opinion, pastels need to be. So that's ranking number 3. Gotta flip my page here. So now you're like, what is number 1, number 2? Excuse me. Number 2 is my Jeffree Star Jawbreaker palette. I know, he's canceled. I bought this secondhand. I say that every time. Do what you will, but I had already bought this, and I'm going to use it. Obviously, this is rainbow, but I love this color story. I do love his formula. He's a crappy person, but the formula is beautiful. I wish this had more shimmers in it. This is a very matte heavy palette, and I love his shimmer formula, so I do wish this had more of those. But if I'm looking for a specific color, this has it in it, and it's gorgeous, and I love it so much. So what is number 1? What are you thinking? If you've been watching me for a while, you're like, what palettes do you have? What could be number 1? What have you heard me talk about so much? And that would be my Profusion Kaleidoscope palette. This is a big honker. This is what she looks like in all of her glory. As you can see, full rainbow. We have a little bit of neutrals. We have our pressed glitters. 100% recommend if you're okay with the big palettes. Because not everybody's into this. This is a 42 shade palette. So not everyone likes the huge color stories. But if you're into it, I highly recommend this big palette because it has all the options that you could want, and the formula on this phenomenal. The pressed glitters, great. The shimmers, great. The mattes, great. I've used every shade in this palette. The only shade that I've had issue with is this green shade, Fern, is a little patchy, but otherwise, every single other shade in this palette performs phenomenally. And for the money, this is great. I even bought the neutral one, the Moonstone palette, because of how much I loved this one. So, in my opinion, for the price point, for what you're getting, the quality, this is the best rainbow palette I have. This is the best rainbow palette you can get. Highly recommend. And that is all 12 rainbow palettes. So let me know in the comments down below. What rainbow palettes do you have? What is your favorite one? Would you have ranked these differently? Out of what I had, what would be your favorite rainbow palette? Because I would love to hear all of your comments down below. And as always, I will see you guys in the next one. Bye, guys.